Hello and welcome. I'm Matthew Lay, and today we are going to cover the basics of navigation and some terminology for AutoCAD. So we will be using AutoCAD this course, and there are some base level functions that you need to understand before we can get started in our drawings. So I have already started AutoCAD and I have it up here, but if you just come down here into your search bar in Windows and just type the word, if you spell it right, AutoCAD, okay, you're going to get AutoCAD 2019 English, which is right there. I already have it open, so I don't need to reopen it. So this is the splash screen that comes on with AutoCAD. And what this screen is asking is, what do you want to do? So we want to start a new drawing. And there's a few ways to do that. Up here, the red A, up at the top here in the left corner, there is a drop-down arrow. If you go there, you could hit New. But if you notice, that little icon is already here for you right there. So you could hit that there as well. And when you say that you want to open a new drawing, AutoCAD wants to start the drawing from a template. A template is nothing more than predefined settings that have been built for you to be able to start from and not have to go in and change a bunch of settings every time you start a new drawing. So AutoCAD comes with a bunch of preset templates, and they all start with ACAD here. And then these ones that you see here are ones that I've created. So we're going to go to this AutoCAD.dwt. Anything that ends in .dwt is a template file. You see right here it says drawing template. So just hit that AutoCAD.dwt and say open. And then your screen will turn to a open area called model space. Now if you notice, it opened a drawing. It didn't open the template. It opened a drawing here. And it gave it a generic name. You'll want to save it. And you can do that here just with this save icon. Or you could come to the caret next to the A and say save or save as. Okay. But the model space is this big, large area that has a black background, and you can see a grid on it. Okay. So that is our space that we will be doing all of our drawing in, is model space. We won't be drawing in a thing called paper space, which we'll talk about later. So in model space, we will do all of our drawing, and it is infinite. You can go left and right, up and down as far as you want to go. Of course, you can't print something that large on a piece of paper, so we have things called paper space, which we can break that drawing down into little sections and print out on a piece of paper. And we can have multiple paper spaces for multiple sizes of paper, whether it's 8.5 by 11, 11 by 17, or S2 or S4. So that is the difference between model space and paper space. I can tell that I'm in model space because that tab is highlighted here. And also down here in the bottom right of center, it tells me that I'm in model space. Okay, we're going to get into drawing objects in another video, but I'm just going to draw a circle here just so we can practice our navigation. So I have a circle here in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, and I want to view this in more detail. Well, if I move the cursor to where it's right about in the center of that circle, and I use a scroll wheel on a mouse, you definitely want to use a mouse and not a touchpad on this, because it's just going to make your life so much easier. And the main benefit you get with the mouse is you get a scroll wheel. So you'll put that there, and you'll use the scroll wheel, and you notice it's zooming in based on where that cursor is. And it zoomed in when I rolled the scroll wheel away from my palm. If I pull it towards my palm, it's going to be zooming out. So I'm going to be going away, and if I extend my finger that's on the scroll wheel, or pushing it away from my palm, it is going to zoom in. Okay. Now, I don't like it that this is to the left of the screen. I want it more in the center. I don't use zoom in and out for that. I use another function called panning. And panning is from the scroll wheel. If you push the scroll wheel down, you notice my icon for my cursor changed from the crosshairs to a hand. And that's like you're putting a hand on a piece of paper. And then you can use the mouse or a trackball to move the model space left and right. And subsequently, the circle moves to the right. So I have it in the center there. So that's called panning. If you hold that center wheel down, you can move up and down. You can move left and right. And then when you release, you're back to just moving the cursor around in that space. Okay. There is another way to zoom in on that and get it to where it's in the center of the screen. So we are highly zoomed out here, and we want to look at that circle in more detail. So the first thing I want to do is select that circle, and the easiest way for me to do is just go over the top of where the line is, and if you notice, it starts glowing. And if I click on it, that means that it's selected. When I select it, it also gets those blue squares around it, and the object kind of gets a blue haze to it as well. Now, if you notice up here in the upper right-hand corner, there is something that looks like a compass. And in the middle of the compass, there is a word that says top. If you double-click that, that's going to zoom in to the extents of what you have selected. And since I only had that circle selected, it brought it to the center of my screen and zoomed in to where it fit the whole screen there. Okay, so that is one way to quickly look at an object and zoom in and pan it to the position that you want. Okay, so I just showed you one way of how you could select that object. I'm going to hit the escape key here, and I'll show you another way. If we start here to the left, you could start in the upper left or the lower left of the circle and click once, and then you start to move right. You notice you're drawing a box. And that box is actually a selection window. And that selection window will, anything that is filled by the box will be selected. So if you notice, the circle still hasn't begun to glow yet. But now that I have drawn a box around the entire circle, it starts to glow. And then I left click again, and I get the circle selected. That's called a selection window. To get out of any selection, you just hit the escape key. And now to the right, if I start to the right, either to the upper right or to the lower right, I'm going to start to the upper right this time, and I move to my left. If you notice, the box is green in color, and this is called a crossing window. And you'll notice it's going to behave differently when I come and just cross that circle. The circle highlights, and all I have to do is left click again, and that means that it is selected that object. So that is called a crossing window. A crossing window, anything that it crosses, anything that it touches will be selected once you give it this second left click. Okay, so those are three different ways. You can either just go over the top of the circle to select it, you can envelop it in the selection window, or you can come just with a crossing window. Okay, so there's three different ways of selecting an object. Okay, let's talk about some terminology. So we talked about model space and we talked about paper space a little bit. Up here is what we call the ribbon. Okay, this happens to be the home ribbon. I can tell that because the home tab is pulled to the front. So the home ribbon is showing because I've selected the home tab. If I select the insert tab, then the insert ribbon is displayed. If I select the annotate tab, the annotate ribbon is displayed, and so on and so forth. Okay, I'm going to come back to the home ribbon. Then the ribbon itself is separated into panels. So this panel right here is the draw panel. If you notice, if I go over the bar that says draw, it highlights and shows me the width of the drawing panel. It goes from the left to the right. You can see that there's a vertical black line here. That is the end of that panel. So the drawing panel has all of those components in it. The modify panel is that wide, and there's the annotation panel within the home ribbon, the layer panel within the home ribbon block, and properties panel, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's just a little bit of terminology for those ribbons and panels. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. I'm just going to hover over it, and if you have something selected, you can just hit the delete key, and that is how you can delete it. If you want to undo the last command that you just did, all you have to do is hit Control Z. Control Z will undo any of the last commands, any of the last command that you had just performed. Okay. So now I want to talk about the grid and snap to grid, ortho, and object snapping. Okay. So we're going to draw the simplest object I can, and that's a line. So I'm going to come up here to the home ribbon. Okay, so here's the home ribbon, and then I'm in the draw panel for line, and I'm going to select line. And if you notice, it says, I actually get down here, this is called a command line. You can actually do a lot just by typing in the command line and without having to use the ribbon and selecting icons. I tend to use both. But down here it tells me that I'm drawing a line, and it says, hey, specify the first point. So the crosshairs, wherever I do my first left click, is going to be the beginning of my line. Now if you notice, I am able to start my line anywhere that I want. I'm not confined to the vortices of my grid. We don't actually want to be operating in this mode because it makes it difficult to intersect lines and join things together if you're not in snapping to grid, which is the next function that I'm going to tell you about. So down here in the lower kind of center to right to center, there is a little a section of dots, and that is our snap to grid icon. If you notice, there's also a quick key for that, that's F9, so you can feel free to use that as well. But I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. If you notice, the icon turned to a light blue background. That means it's on. And now you notice when you move the cursor, I'm moving the cursor here, the cursor will only stop on the vortices of a grid coordinate. Okay, so I'm going to select once, and then if you notice, the other end of the line is forced to go to a grid position. Now if you notice, I can draw in any angle in any direction, and that's because I have ortho off. So if I come over here, it looks like a symbol for a right angle. I'm going to turn that on, and that's going to force me to either go in 0 degrees that way or 90 degrees in either direction, or 180 degrees opposite. Okay, so I have to go from my starting point on a coordinate. So you can think of your starting point as 0, 0 on a coordinate quadrant layout, and you have to go left or right, up or down. Okay, so that's ortho, and I'm going to go ahead and click the line to finish. Now if you notice, it wants to continue drawing a line. Okay, it assumes that you didn't want to draw just one line, that you wanted to do multiple lines. But I want to come down here and turn ortho off now, and I can do that while I'm still drawing the extension of my line. So that's pretty cool that I can do that. Okay, so that is our snap to grid and ortho. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and draw another line here now. That line, because ortho was off, could be at a different angle. Now I don't want to draw a third line. All I have to do is hit my escape key, and then I'm done drawing that line. Okay, so now I want to talk about object snapping. And what object snapping is I'm going to draw a square here. If I want to draw a line and I want it to land on this object at a particular location, we have to be aware of what settings we have for our object snap. So if you notice, there's a little down arrow next to my grid settings, snap to grid setting. So here, snap settings, if you select that, there are several tabs here. Here we can actually change the dimensions of our grid. This particular grid on this particular template was set to 1/2 inch. But if we come to this object snap, if we select that, you want to make sure that you hit select all. That will give you, when you're selecting to an object, you can select to an endpoint, a midpoint, a center, a geographic center, all these different components. And it just is going to be very, very helpful in this class if that is selected. Okay, so now I want to draw a line, and I'm going to show you the different icons that are going to show up for those different positions when I'm trying to draw a line to connect to this box. Okay, so I'm going to come up here, and I still have my snap to grid, which is good. I'm going to start a line here, and I want it to go, let's say, to the edge of the box. And if you notice the corner of the box there, it has a green square. That's a little icon that tells you that you're on a vertice of a box. Now, if I move to the center of the line, the midpoint of that line, it changes to a triangle. Okay, so that will tell you whenever you see a triangle that you're in the midsection of that object that you're on. And then here, if I move to the center of the circle, the geometric center of the circle, the square, you notice the shape or little icon changes to a green circle. So those are all very helpful little icons that you can see when you're snapping to objects. Okay, so now I know that this line is perfectly in the center of that square, and we can continue to draw snapping to different objects in that manner. Okay, so that's about as long as I wanted to make this video. This is just an intro. We'll have more videos on the use of AutoCAD and how to actually draw specific objects and how to start with a specific template. So I hope this was helpful. We'll see you in the next video.